What is your takeaway on what Lynch said earlier in the week when he was talking about, hey, we got a bunch of needs, but he said the defensive front is the priority. So that could be defensive end, it could be defensive tackle, it also could be inside or outside linebacker. Were you surprised that he listed the defensive front? This is a team that badly needs receivers, badly needs offensive line upgrades. George Kittle may not play, and they don't have anybody. Outside of Tonjes. Are you surprised that Lynch was like, "Hey, it's the defensive front which is our priority"?
So, in talking to a lot of NFL general managers and head coaches this week, a lot of them obviously have a strategy where you build your rosters inside out, meaning you prioritize the offensive line and the defensive line, and then you work your way out to the boundary as you're building your football team. It's an old school scout general manager football saying. And so I love how the Niners, under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan since 2017, have prioritized the defensive line. I think it's really important to get after the quarterback. We saw in 2024 all of the problems that the Niners ran into trying to stop the run. Up front, they were getting gashed over and over and over again. And that's not a sustainable way to play football, because then the opposing offense can hog the ball, control the clock, really control and dictate the pace, the flow, and the physicality of the game. Then the defense wears out. They're on the field so long because of that. And then you're not doing any favors for your offense. And you think about this Niners team in 2025, they were dead last in the NFL in sacks. Now, naturally, in 2026, I think they're going to get better in that regard, but the pressure numbers weren't great. The sack numbers, of course, were not good, and John Lynch talked about that. And since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan came to the Niners to take over this organization in 2017, they have spent a lot of money along the defensive line. They have prioritized the defensive line. I do think that's a need looking ahead to 2026. Now, you get Nick Bosa back, you get Mykel Williams back, Fred Warner at that second level. It's naturally going to improve your defense. We'll see what happens with Bryce Huff. The Niners, if they cut him, would be able to open up $5 million in cap room. You and I have talked about that, and there is very little dead money involved there. I personally would keep Bryce Huff at the contract that he's under, because a speed rusher who showed glimpses opposite of Nick Bosa can be utilized in this game for Raheem Morris. And it looks like the Niners also, in talking to John Lynch, are going to stick with that wide nine. So the continued development of Alfred Collins and CJ West, great. And again, I love how the Niners prioritize the defensive line. You and I were texting about this yesterday, though. I can't stand how they won't prioritize and they continue to ignore the offensive line. And John Lynch in his presser pinpointed the defensive line. Didn't really talk about the offensive line. And then in an interview with Jennifer Lee Chan of NBC Sports Bay Area, she does a fantastic job. It was great to catch up with her today. He defended the offensive line, and he thinks that this unit is good enough. He complimented Jake Brendle. He said finding Dominic Pooney was a great steal for us in the NFL draft, that Colton McKivitz is a high-end right tackle. They're very proud of the player he's become and how he's been able to develop. Okay, Pooney's solid. Colton McKivitz is okay at $15 million per year in this robust tackle market, but they are not good enough with Jake Brendle at center when they match up against a team like Seattle. They're not close to being good enough at the left guard spot. And who knows what happens with Trent Williams. And what's odd, Larry, is that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch think that they are good enough along the offensive line. But you and I were texting, were the two Seattle games late in the year not enough of a wake-up call to confirm that they need to change their offensive line philosophy and change how they view the importance of that group? Literally everybody who I talk to at the NFL Combine who covers the league or is involved in the league or works in the league, when I ask them, what do the Niners need to do to improve on offense? How can they close the gap on the Seattle Seahawks? Everybody mentions the offensive line, and it's immediate that they mention the offensive line. Unfortunately, the Niners decision makers don't see it that way. And as long as they continue to have that opinion, I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl, because I do believe that that position group is of the utmost importance, especially in Kyle Shanahan's offense, where the ground game the last 2 years hasn't been as good because the interior is getting bullied around.
Yeah, I mean, you had 5 games this year where Christian McCaffrey, who we would all agree is one of the best running backs in pro football, averaged under 3 yards a carry. 5 games. So what do you how do you make heads or tails of that? And how can you sit there and say that your offensive line? They said 2 things this week that make me wonder if they're ever going to get there. One is this belief, this undying belief in this totally, thoroughly mediocre, and that's not really that's not really honest to say that they're mediocre, because that means they're in the middle, and they're not in the middle. They've got an awesome left tackle. They have no left guard. He's going to walk. Their center is not really that strong as a pass protector. Got his quarterback smoked on the first play of the Seattle game. DeMarcus Lawrence, simple loop across the middle, smoked Purdy in the face. Brendle should have picked him up, didn't, turned his back on him. So I don't think Brendle's much as a pass protector, and he doesn't move anybody at age 33 and 285 pounds in the run game. So what would you say you do here? I think Pooney was totally ordinary this year, and I think Colton McKivitz is pretty good. So you got a great left tackle, a pretty good right tackle, a third-round pick that kind of backslid a little bit in Pooney, and then 2 gigantic gaping holes. And if they don't see that, I mean, that one bugged me. The other one that bugged me is this. It's clear to me. Now, I don't know if it's clear to others because nobody else seemed to pick up on this, and maybe I'm just seeing things or hearing things that other people aren't hearing. To me, it was absolutely perfectly clear that John Lynch said that Deebo Samuel is coming back to the Niners. I mean, to me, there was no way around it. He was asked a question about receivers, and he's like, yeah, and we may actually bring back a guy that, we've had here before. And some people were like, no, Krug, he was talking about JJ. He's talking about, Jennings and Bourne. No, he's not. Those guys are on the team.
Yeah, they're on the team.
They're on the team now. He's not talking about former players with guys that are on the team now. He's talking about Deebo. Deebo's coming back. So I love you, John Lynch. I got nothing but respect for you. But you think your offensive line's good, and you think Deebo Samuel for a second go round at 30 is a wise move. I got to question both those out of the chute. I really do. I don't want to be anti the establishment take, but if that's the established take, I'm going against it all day, every day, and twice on Sunday.
And one thing that was crazy in the lead up to that divisional round game against Seattle, when Jake Brendle was once again exposed, was when Kyle Shanahan said he's one of the top centers in the NFL. So I want everybody to find themselves somebody who loves them as much as the Niners love Jake Brendle. And look, is he a good run blocker? He is, and he grades out very well in that area. Is he very smart and cerebral pre-snap? Yes. Does he do a lot for this offense as far as calling out protections and understanding what the defense is doing? For sure. But when he has to go up against some of the better interior defensive linemen in the NFL, too often he is beat, too often he is on the ground, and way too often he is pushed into the lap of Brock Purdy. And I went back and looked at how he's fared as a pass protector just based on pressures given up, because when the Niners go up against really good defensive lines, way too often their quarterback, who they just gave a contract extension to, and the priority should be keeping him on his feet and not his butt, is too often under siege from the inside. In 2023, Jake Brendle gave up 29 pressures that ranked 30th among all centers in the NFL.
Wow. That alone means he can't be one of the best centers in pro football in a passing league.
Exactly. And look, I know some of it is offensive line protections and the scheme of Kyle Shanahan, but it's also him getting beat, right? In 2024, he gave up 26 pressures, 3 less, but that was 37th among all centers in the league. In 2025, he gave up 23 pressures. That was 31st in the NFL. And so where those rankings are, just on pressures given up alone, according to Pro Football Focus, shows that Jake Brendle is one of the worst centers in the NFL. And the Deebo Samuel thing, what do the Niners need to do on offense this offseason? They need to get younger. They were the oldest offensive unit in the NFL this past year. They need to get faster, leaner, and more explosive. Deebo Samuel does not help you do that in any of those 4 categories. And we saw late in 2024 when he started to complain about the lack of touches, that when Kyle Shanahan started to force feed him the ball, the offense got worse. And after teams started to make the adjustment of Deebo getting carries as a wide back all throughout 2024, it was nauseating and frustrating how inefficient the Niners were when they ran the ball with Deebo. He is an older, aging player, and he might help the Niners have a physical presence on offense, but I just don't see how he gets you to that level where you can close the gap on Seattle. And here's a direct quote from Lynch that you're talking about, Larry. Quote, "We've got opportunities to bring back guys to improve ourselves by either bringing back some of the players who have been with us or finding new players." Again, who else is he talking about other than Deebo Samuel? He's talking about Deebo, in my opinion. And that was a good catch by you.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. And I mean, as you said, I mean, that doesn't make you faster, doesn't make you younger, doesn't make you healthier, doesn't make you more dynamic, doesn't make you
can't run
more
routes. He
explosive.
can't beat man coverage.
Can't run routes, can't beat man coverage, doesn't separate. Last time that he was with the Niners, I think he averaged like 2.5 yards a carry on designed runs.
He did.
So like
under 3.
The Deebo run option is not a great option. Here's one of my buddies sent me a note yesterday. He's like, "Krug, I totally agree with you. I can't believe that Lynch and the Niners are considering reuniting with Deebo." He's like, "Here's my only thing that makes sense. They need some wide receiver continuity, and they're going to trade Ricky, and they're going to wave goodbye to JJ. And this is a way to maintain some continuity." I don't love it, but you know what? I was told by a Niner person in the playoffs that the Niners were more than likely going to trade in the offseason Renardo Green and Ricky Pearsall. I shared that with people, and people started attacking me. You know, I mean, you know the drill because you do this like I do for a living, and it's just people don't. If you say something that doesn't jive with what Niner fans want to hear, they're going to jump you. And people jump me. "Oh, what do you know about it?" You know, now people telling people that, "Oh, my sources aren't legit." It's like, what? You know, I don't need to do this. This is not my lane. I'm not Tom Pelissaro. I don't break stories. I don't need to break anything like this for the success of my YouTube channel or the success of my career. I'm just passing along info that was shared. And I did find it interesting that this week ESPN lists Renardo Green as an 80% chance of being traded. 80% chance. What do you think of that, of my buddy's theory that maybe the Niners want some wide receiver continuity? That's why they're going to bring back Deebo, and that it probably means they're going to move on from JJ and Pearsall, and they need some continuity at a vitally important position.
I'm fine with letting Jauan Jennings go because I think another team is going to give him a contract that the Niners see as too expensive, and that's fine. Again, you need to get younger and faster on offense, and Jauan Jennings is going to be 29 years old when the season comes around. And what did he run in the pre-draft processes? We're talking about the combine here on the show, a 4.7. So he isn't a fast player. Now, where it hurts you is the continuity and camaraderie that he has with Brock Purdy. Some of the throws that Purdy has made to Jauan Jennings and the level of anticipation and touch on those throws, all world stuff. So it would hurt to lose Jauan Jennings, but the only way that theory kind of makes sense, you let JJ go, and if you were to trade Ricky Pearsall, you bring back Deebo. John Lynch said during his presser this week that they need to get some contributions from Jacob Cowing, 4.4 guy, Jordan Watkins, 4.3 guy. Can they finally stay healthy? We'll see, but it would require another move or two at wide receiver. Could that be signing Alec Pearson free agency? Could it be using the 27th overall pick on a wide receiver like Casey Concepcion, who's a dynamic athlete out of Texas A&M, but he needs to figure out some of his drop issues? Could it be going after a player like Omar Cooper, who runs better than Jauan Jennings, but gives you size and a big-bodied threat that Jauan Jennings gave you? I'll also say this, was able to sit in on Daniel Jeremiah's combine press conference yesterday, it is a deep and rich class for wide receivers of all types of different flavors. You've got possession guys. You've got guys who are bigger, who can go up and get it, who can box you out and come down with some of those 50-50 balls. You've got speed guys. You've got a guy like Zachariah Branch, who is really quick. I think he runs well, but is more of a gadget weapon. And so that theory makes sense to me if the Niners make like 2 or 3 other moves combined, free agency and in the draft, to address the wide receiver spot.
Chase Sr. with us on the Yuma guest line as we chop it up here on Niners Nightly, day 1 of the Combine. Chase is joining us from Indianapolis, the site of the NFL Scouting Combine. Yahoo reports that the Niners will receive Mac Jones trade offers throughout the week. One NFL executive said expect the offers to come this week. And added there's a price. CBS Sports is saying that Pittsburgh, that the Steelers potentially would offer a second-round pick for Jones. I've talked about this for a long time. I think a second-round pick is absolutely a fair price. I know a lot of people go, second-round pick. No, dude. Supply and demand. It's about supply and demand. And if you know your econ, supply and demand, yeah, if Mac Jones were in what's he actually worth? He's probably worth a 3rd or a 4th-round pick. But in this market, he might be the closest thing that exists to Sam Darnold as a reclamation project quarterback who potentially has high upside. And with Mendoza being the only real starter out there, I'd ask a very high price. And I think the Niners probably are. There's people that have maintained they're not going to move him. I absolutely know that they are going to move him. And it's not like I have no sources. I just know football. And I know how many needs the 49ers have, and I know how many needs trading Mac Jones could potentially fill. And I just don't think the 49ers, with 7 picks and, the Matt Barrows line, that they're not going to have a big, vibrant, free agent period. If they want to run with the Eagles, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the best teams in pro football, they have to trade Mac Jones. And I know that's a risk because if Purdy gets hurt, what happens then? But guess what? If you don't trade Mac Jones for something real, what happens then? Why don't we start asking that question? Because I don't think the 49ers are prepared to fill the needs that they have unless they move Jones.
Yeah, they either really like Curtis Rourke and they think that he can be QB2, and what he did at Indiana in 2024 en route to a college football playoff appearance prior to the run that they went on this past year and winning the national championship was impressive, and he did it on a torn ACL. Or the Niners have plans to sign another player in free agency like a Zach Wilson. Perhaps he could be their next reclamation project. Could they make a trade for a player like J.J. McCarthy or Anthony Richardson, who the Colts today gave permission to seek a trade? Or could they look in the draft to try to draft a quarterback like Drew Aller, who they could develop? I could see Kyle Shanahan falling in love with Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU, who had to face a lot of adversity this past year. That LSU program was a mess, but going into the season, he was looked at as a projected first-round pick. And let's just count the quarterback-needy teams. There are a lot of them, and I have 9 by my count. Pittsburgh Steelers need a quarterback. We're not sure what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. Miami Dolphins. Miami wants to move off of Tua Tagovailoa. New York Jets. They brought in a veteran coach and Frank Reich to be their OC, but they don't have a good quarterback on the roster. Don't hit me with Justin Fields. Minnesota Vikings, they are so out on J.J. McCarthy. Arizona Cardinals, Monty Ossenfort said this week, I know you're all going to ask about the quarterback spot, but Kyler Murray is under contract. It's hard to believe that he'd be back this year, but we'll see. Maybe Mike LaFleur wants to work with him. Las Vegas Raiders, I think they go Mendoza, so maybe you can take them away from that. Atlanta Falcons, Cleveland Browns, and the Indianapolis Colts. We'll see if the Colts bring back Daniel Jones, but he's coming off a torn Achilles. So all those teams are in need of a quarterback. And let's say the 49ers want to continue to rebuild through the draft to have some of these cost-controlled assets over the next 4 or 5 years, right? If you get offered a 2nd and a 3rd round pick in a draft that is pretty deep at a couple of positions that happen to really help the Niners, wide receiver and defensive end, 2 positions that they need to address, I think the trade would be worth it. Is there risk? no doubt about it. Mac Jones won 5 games for the Niners last year, but he's going to walk after this year anyway. So if you get 2 potential players in draft picks for Mac Jones, I think it might be worth it. Again, risky for sure, but it gives you an opportunity to really bring in some good players to really bulk up your roster in the second and third rounds, where John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have missed a lot frequently over the last few years.
Matt Barrows is one of the best covering the Niners. He's got a pretty interesting article up, the 10 prospects for the Niners to watch this week. And it's an interesting group of guys that he's highlighting here. He's got Jeremy Bernard, the wide receiver from Alabama, Chris Brazzell, the second, the 6'5", 6'6" wide receiver from Tennessee, Casey Concepcion from A&M, who's tremendous vertical receiver, Omar Cooper Jr., who you mentioned. I think, I love Omar Cooper. Those Indiana prospects are amazing. So those are the receivers. Then he's got Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M, and Lynch said, hey, we may see some different body types on the D-line. I think that's his way of saying they may go smaller with some of these edge rushers in this draft that have some speed but are sitting around 250 pounds. And then Malachi Fields is on this list from Notre Dame, Max Ayin Achor, the unbelievable 330-pound offensive tackle from ASU, Akeem Mesidor from Miami, TJ Parker from Clemson, Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon, round out Barrow's top 10. Of those guys, are you hearing anything about any buzz about any of those guys? And if you could match one of those guys to the 49ers or have one of those guys come here, which one do you like out of that group?
I like a few of those players. Kenyon Sadiq spoke today, and he's a really unique tight end, a freak athlete who's a little bit shorter, but I think the Niners would really like him because of the athleticism, his big playability, the ability to create separation, the ability to run over guys, make people miss, and be dynamic in the open field. But he can also block at that tight end position. So Kenyon Sadiq is interesting. I just don't know if he's going to be available at 27 overall. I mean, you think back to last year, you had Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren go within the first, 10 or 11 picks. So a team looking for a tight end, he's by far tight end 1 in this class, in my opinion. Chris Brazzell is a fascinating player. He's 6'5", he's really lengthy, and he runs in the 4.4s, but he's not a great route runner, runs a lot of hitches. His route tree is very limited. And the Niners over the last couple of years have tried to find players since that Kansas City Super Bowl loss in 2023 who can beat man coverage, who have a diverse route tree. He's not a one-trick pony. He can certainly get behind the defense, and he's dynamic in that regard, but he's a polarizing player. Some NFL people have him as a first-round pick. Others think that he's a second or a third-round guy. I have heard a lot about Omar Cooper rising up draft boards. A few months ago, a lot of people thought maybe he was a second or a third round pick. Would not surprise me if he got into the first round. I think he would give San Francisco really good size at the position, runs well enough, but is a willing run blocker and no character concerns. And with what happened with Brandon Ayuk, I think the Niners would love to have a player like that. Casey Concepcion is developing as a route runner, has special teams ability, and is electric in the open field. He is a home run threat anytime he gets his hands on the football. He could help right away with special teams, but he's got some drop issues. And by the way, Kenyon Sadiq had 6 drops last year. I don't think that's too much of a problem. So those are some of the players who really stand out to me. A lot of the wide receivers who you mentioned, I really like them. Akeem Mesidor is a pass rusher out of Miami who is already 25 years old. If he were 22, 23, I think he'd be a top 10 pick because at times I thought he looked better than Ruben Bain. And there are massive question marks around Ruben Bain's arm length. There has not been a pass rusher selected in the top 100 picks with sub 32-inch arms. But I think Ruben Bain might defy the odds because he's special. But opposite of him, Akeem Mesidor has a better body, is probably more of an NFL fit for a certain style of defense, but he's going to be 26 next season. So some red flags there, but I think he'd be a great fit to help the Niners immediately.
One guy that had a great combine workout today was Clemson's defensive tackle, DeMonte Capehart. Now, I really like this kid. He was a really highly rated recruit, I believe, coming out of high school. He's 313 pounds, and he ran 4.85 in the
Insane.
40 at 6'5", 313. This guy was thought to be a day 3 pick. He's probably going to go on day 2. But Clemson has gotten some really, really great athletes through the years, and this guy's one of them. And I think people are kind of sleeping on Capehart. I think he's going to be a pretty good player. I had him in a number of mocks to the Niners in the 4th and 5th and 6th round, but I don't think he's going to be there. The way he worked out today. Couple other thoughts before we say goodbye. The Niners, according to a report today, offered the Jets a 3rd-round pick for Jermaine Johnson at the last year's trade deadline, and the Jets said no. Jets wanted a 2nd-round pick. Well, today the Jets shipped him to Tennessee for Tavondre Sweat. Obviously, the Jets are switching, from a 4-3 to a 3-4, and that Sweat's a nose guard. It's not often you see impact edge rushers traded for nose guards, but I kind of think the Jets won this deal. That's interesting, though, that the 49ers, were offering a 3rd-round pick for Jermaine Johnson, and then the Jets said, no, we're not trading him unless you offer a 2nd. The Niners wouldn't bend. It's probably the smart move, but man, I don't think the 49ers, let's just say this. I don't think the 49ers were going to win the Super Bowl even if they had landed him. So it was probably the right in hindsight. Is there anybody that we haven't mentioned that you've heard buzz about or ties to the Niners in any way, either veteran trades, because there's a lot of trade rumors there, or even prospects that maybe the Niners are thought to covet? Anybody, any whispering among the people there at the Combine?
Well, it's funny with Jermaine Johnson, thrived under Robert Saleh with the Jets. Robert Saleh wanted him when he came back to the Niners. Robert Saleh trades for him as he goes to the Titans. So clearly he's very high on the player, and Jermaine Johnson is really looking forward to reuniting with Saleh. As far as players to the Niners, again, everybody here at the NFL Combine who I've talked to has said the Niners need to address offensive line. I just don't know if the Niners go that route. An interesting nugget that I gathered this week was that Caden Proctor, the left tackle for Alabama, when the season started, he was 390 pounds. That's a huge red flag for me. Some people think that he's a guard. Some people think that he's a tackle. As the season progressed, he got into better shape and he started to play better. But I might be out on him if he can't control some of those weight issues, because to me, that comes down to discipline. And is the body going to be able to hold up over a long period of time? So that's a little bit troublesome. Casey Concepcion to the Niners has some buzz, but then I get concerned too, because Kyle Shanahan loses trust in players so quickly. You think about Brandon Ayuk in the doghouse in 2021. You think about what happened to Dante Pettis. You think about what's happening right now to Ricky Pearsall. If Casey Concepcion drops a few balls, like Jordan Watkins had a good camp, and then he made some rookie mistakes, and then we never saw him for the entire rookie campaign. So is Kyle Shanahan going to be willing to give him some leeway? I'm not sure, but that's a name that's kind of been tied to the Niners a little bit. I feel like for draft prospects, once the Combine is over, we'll start to get a little bit of a better grasp. As far as what happens in free agency, I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners look at safety. I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners really prioritize the defensive line. If they can't land Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson on a short-term deal, I think would make a lot of sense for San Francisco, because I also don't think the AAV, on top of it being a short-term deal, would be that prohibitive for San Francisco. That's more so of what I'd like to see compared to what I'm hearing now.
One guy who they supposedly met with, who I'm a big fan of, and he didn't get invited to the Combine, is the Navy defensive tackle, Landon Robinson. Now, we don't talk a lot about Navy for good reason. They don't have a lot of big-time prospects, and really haven't since, Roger Staubach or something way back. But Landon Robinson is an absolute monster. He's definitely a top 100, top 150 kind of player for me, for sure. 126 tackles over the last 2 seasons, 14 TFLs, 10.5 sacks, 62 pressures, 8.6 pressure rate. He is short, stocky, and fast. And usually those guys were, people stayed away from them. And then Aaron Donald came out of nowhere and was like, kind of made scouts look at these guys a little bit closer. But I love this kid Robinson. He plays hard. The motor's just always revving. I know he's short, but this guy's an interior rusher. The Niners have to find somebody who's a dynamic interior rusher, because Collins and West don't give you a lot of rush, And if they're going to be better at sacking the quarterback, they've got to have an interior guy that can get to the quarterback. And maybe Robinson is that guy. What do you think?
That's why I like Zane Durant, by the way, who
Yeah.
ran sub 4.8 in the 40-yard dash. And that's
Another
a
great
defensive
one.
tackle who's a little bit smaller, but that's the type of player who I think the Niners need. I mean, Alfred Collins is 6'6", 330. CJ West is not as tall, but he's a big body who, like Alfred Collins, is really good against the run. But a player like Zane Durant in the draft is a player who I think can really get after the quarterback from the interior, which you also have to factor in is what the Niners were doing last year with the return of Robert Saleh. And they've always liked this NASCAR package, but Nick Bosa was rushing from the interior. Michael Williams was rushing from the interior. I don't think it makes any sense to bring back a player like Yetur Gross-Matos, but how about reuniting and bringing back Cleveland Ferrell, who the Niners reunited with technically in 2025, but that's a cheap veteran who's played well in this game. It makes a lot of sense because he could play defensive end and at defensive tackle and helps you get after the quarterback as a depth piece from the interior.
Two last thoughts before we say goodbye. Anthony Richardson demanded a trade today, and he's really, really, really raw. I don't think he's ready to play. But I'll say this, and somebody, I think it was, I forget who it was, but somebody suggested that this guy grab a hold of his career and come to San Francisco as the third string guy with no guaranteed money and just try to replicate what Darnold did, what Jones has done, try to rebuild his value. I don't think I'd be interested in a backup quarterback situation because you got to win. You got to win. And this guy's really, really raw. He's very athletic. But you know what? I would be interested in this player if I could get him as a third string quarterback. What do you think is going to happen to Richardson? He's 6'4", 250 with 4.4 speed. And I mean, as far as just raw tools, maybe there's never ever been a quarterback with this level of size, speed, arm strength, the whole deal. But there's also red flags there. He's not a bad guy, but he did, how much does he love to play? How tough is he? He pulled himself out of a game because he was tired. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I do see Richardson and say, wow, if Darnold can be built up, if Jones can be built up, these guys are not great athletes. This kid is maybe one of the greatest athletes who's ever played the position. To me, it's intriguing to think of Shanahan, Purdy, Richardson, and what that could become.
I agree. And I've never been a huge Anthony Richardson guy, but when Kyle Shanahan has maximized the likes of Jimmy Garoppolo, made it to a Super Bowl with him, CJ Beathard, Nick Mullins, and Niners were competitive with them. When he's done what he's done with Brock Purdy as Mr. Irrelevant, when he helped to save the career of Sam Darnold, now a Super Bowl champion who's played really well the last 2 years, when he gets Mac Jones back on track, everybody's going to be looking at that next quarterback who failed with a prior destination or destinations as a player who could come to the Niners, resurrect or revive their career. So Anthony Richardson is a traits-based quarterback who in the pre-draft process a few years ago, coming out of Florida in the lead up to the 2023 draft, everybody fell in love with because he's an absolute athletic freak. Now, I was never a huge fan of his for two reasons. Lack of experience. He only played 24 games in college, 8 his second year, 12 his final year, and he's never been accurate. And what you need to do in Kyle Shanahan's offense is be accurate. Yeah. He was a 50% completion guy in year one, only 4 games, 59.4% in 8 games in 2021, and then 53.8% in 2022. So 6'4", yes. Bazooka for an arm, no doubt. Is he mobile and athletic? For sure. If you've ever seen the highlight reel of him throwing down windmill dunks in transition on the fast break, it's ridiculous. But I'd rather side for a player like Zach Wilson, who Sean Payton took a chance on, Mike McDaniel took a chance on, and we saw some okay moments when he was with the Jets. So that's more of a player who I'd like to go after, or a player like J.J. McCarthy, who I thought should have stayed at Michigan because he was raw and inexperienced. I thought he came out a little bit too early, and frankly, he's not ready. But can Kyle Shanahan get him on track? That would be a flex by him to do what Kevin O'Connell could not do.
Last one, the NFLPA had their grades today on a number of different things across the league. 49ers were graded very highly in some areas and very lowly in other areas. They got a high grade, an A in strength coach. They got an A in food and dining. They got an A minus. Lynch got an A minus. Shanahan got an A minus. Jed got an A minus. The treatment of families, they were given a B. Their locker room was given a B. Their weight room was given an A. Their offensive coordinator an A minus. Their defensive coordinator an A minus. Brant Boyer got a B plus. Where they struggled, their training staff got a C minus. Their training room got a C minus. Their team travel got a C plus. What was your takeaways from the grades that were doled out?
A lot of good. I mean, the head coach, general manager, and owner were graded very highly. That's what you want to see. And the Niners over time have proven that they're one of the more well-run organizations in the sport. I know they haven't won a Super Bowl since 1994, but since then they have been to a lot of NFC championship games and a lot of Super Bowls. And that doesn't happen if you are a Cleveland Browns or a Cincinnati Bengals or a New York Jets. So that's good. The strength and conditioning coach, that is a good sign, even though the Niners, according to people who I've talked to in that type of field, do things a little bit differently. Where you'd like to see the Niners improve given their injury history is the training room and then the training staff. That's where I'd like to see the Niners get a little bit better. All teams don't grade out well for the most part for travel, because I think everybody wants to be in first class, but with the way that they make planes and how expensive other planes are, it's hard to accommodate everybody being in first class when you have a 53-man roster and a large coaching staff. But some good and a little bit of bad there for the Niners, but graded out well in some important categories.